Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm going to talk about 4 additional, what I'm calling prophecies, but really what these are predictions for the future. A lot of people have been searching and looking around to try and figure out what's on the horizon. What are there any prophecies? You know, back in the day, a prophet was somebody that would that was told by God that would predict a future thing. And basically, what I'm doing is talking about what I see as political inevitabilities and what we really need to be on the lookout, because no matter what, with COVID and with the political climate, but then also the worldwide structure, with powers having new capabilities, that there are things that we do not think about. So I think you'll agree with me. Like and subscribe if you like this. Doing a little bit of keyword stuff, but I got 4 things that I'm telling you what, in this new reality. Check out my other video. I said four predictions or prophecies around the coming political divide within America. And really, it's all about this idea that blue states are going to become more blue, red are going to become more red, and we're going to be seeing this hit our workplaces and everything. But I got 4 additional ones here. First off, I think what we're going to see right now is an increase in what I call, or what would be called, the nomenclatura. 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 I want you to go grab a book, look it up. It's kind of hard to find. But what the nomenclatura was back during the Soviet days, so the USSR, was this group of people that had a blessing, that had an inside route. Now, one of the things that people don't understand about socialism and communism is, as soon as you start to try and create equal outcomes for people, what happens is there is a new group of people with ultimate control. In your pursuit of not having any class, or reducing classes and helping the worker and empowering the worker and getting rid of the capitalist that exploits workers' labor for profit and trying to hand that back to them, one superpower gets created. And that would be the bureaucrat, the person who's in charge of actually getting that done. So instead of having people that add value in the economy and organize labor and organize stuff together to create value and get chosen, like in a capitalist society, Apple has to create products so that we choose them and they compete against each other. Now what happens is the companies that have the blessing from the government, or those who are able to operate their business, all of a sudden get an inside route. So what happens is, what we're going to see right now, and it's because of COVID, and it's because of these new endeavors, we're going to see government having this new amount of power that allows them to pick and choose losers. And what's going to happen is because there's going to be these groups of people, there's going to be a buildup of power in these agencies and these bureaucratic spots, and it's going to be, back in the day, what was called the nomenclatura. So real quick history lesson: during the communist revolution, when socialism was really tried out under, first it was Lenin, and then it ended up going to Stalin as Stalin took control, and Trotsky and Stalin really, they murdered a lot of people. But one of the things that happens is, when you are centrally planning everything, all of a sudden, people owe their livelihoods to you. You get your job by the blessings and the choosing of the bureaucrat, right? So, for example, they went into the Soviet Union and they decided, we wanted to do this great leap forward. You should look up the Soviet Great Leap Forward. And basically what it was is, Stalin decided, we are going to march forward, or the commies, the USSR decided that we need to advance technologically and industrially. We need to catch up with our competitors, and what we're going to do is, we are going to take people out of these rural areas, we're going to put them into factories, and in order to do that, we need to upgrade our food production. And basically, central planners took away farmland and took away the ability to earn a living from farming from people that were passionate and good at producing profit. They actually killed them, slaughtered them, murdered them, took their land away because they were evil capitalists. There's all sorts of different reasons. Then they gave it over to the state bureaucrats, and one thing is true about the bureaucrat: they don't care. So you go look into the Great Leap Forward. It led to hundreds of millions of deaths through starvations, and basically what that was is just, whenever government controls things rather than the free market earning someone's choice, the result is simple: you have surpluses and you have shortages. Target does a much better job. Walmart does a much better job, along with Procter & Gamble, at making sure that toilet paper gets into our hands during a crisis than if the government was in charge of handing out the toilet paper to everybody. So the result is there are these people who are in charge of blessing and choosing and making decisions, and they are the ultimate bureaucrat with all the power. Well, now if we fast forward a little bit, and let's take a look at, there is a group of people right now in every state and in every region and in every sector, a government bureaucrat that chooses, first of all, a politician or a lawmaker that chooses who got to stay in business during a pandemic risk. They got to choose what is the appropriate pandemic risk. You got to find out what sectors are essential and which ones are not. Within each sector, there's like the rule application of, are you obeying the rule? Are you getting inspected and following through? One of the facts of, no matter left or right, what we can agree to is right now, there are restaurants out there that are like trying to get by and trying to open. There are some that are overtly saying, screw you, we're just opening. And then you know who shows up? The people that are in charge of keeping their license, the business license. So the government bureaucrat comes in there and is saying, hey, we're going to revoke your license. Or our attorney generals, like Keith Ellison here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, decides to sue the pants off of these people because they're acting without their business license, which was held over their heads to require compliance for whatever the central bureaucrat decides. Now, whether or not the bureaucrat is right or wrong is irrelevant. What is relevant is, why are there groups of people that can decide that a business should be shut down or not? Milton Friedman told us that this was an issue back 20, 30 years ago. Milton Friedman, a brilliant economist, he was an Austrian economics guy, Austrian economy theory. He was against Keynesian demand side economics. He was a supply side economics guy, but he warned us that the more we have consumer protection laws to make sure that a business would do X, Y, Z, and the way we do that is through a business license. You know, we have Food and Drug Administration, we have the CDC, we have all of these different, the FTC, we have these bureaucracies that come in and say, hey, we're going to inspect your restaurant to make sure that you're safe for people, make sure you don't have rats back there, and we're going to make sure that you're clean and you have a sign in your bathroom reminding your employees to wash their hands. And if you don't pass our rules, we're going to revoke your business license or your liquor licenses. And what people don't understand is that whenever we have these consumer protections, it's not necessarily whether or not that's a good idea. The free press should be the ones shining the light, doing investigative journalism, shining the light on things like that. Instead, what we do is rely on a central bureaucrat to come in and to bless whether or not something should be open. You look at right now, the fact of the matter is, wherever there's a licensure law, there's manipulation by the central shot caller. Right now it's been in most governors' hands, so the governors are running their states much differently. But play the movie forward over the next 10 years, folks. There's going to be a race for giant, if you were the restaurant industry right now and you were part of the Restaurateur Association, an Entrepreneurs Association, or maybe you were part of the Better Business Bureau, whatever it is, right now they're going to be racing to get their people into government right now so that we don't have this kind of shakedown. Whether or not you agree with it or not, you have to admit that there's a group of people with a group of power that's a little spooky right now. Now, why is the nomenclature? Why are we going to have these insiders? Because what the word nomenclature really referred to was that there's two sets of people. Those that are politically connected and those that are not. So for example, here in Minnesota, we had a guy during the first shutdown that was friends with Governor Walz, and he had a candy store. It's the world's largest candy store, right? It's out of, it's like Southwest. It's just kind of by Shakopee type of deal in Jordan, Minnesota. And basically, because he was friends, he reached out and said, hey, why can't I be open? I'm much more like a Walmart than anybody else. And he got a little cutout, and everybody made an example of him, but that's a perfect example. Those that have lobbyists right now, those that have friendships in government, those that have a phone number, can call those within to get themselves a nice little cutout. We are going to have a drastic increase. And let me shift into why that's going to increase. Not just because of COVID, but because the new people that are in power right now, love or hate the Democrats, that's irrelevant. I love my Democrat friends. I genuinely do. I think they're good people. I think they love people. I think they are strategically flawed, and they ignore the unintended consequences of what's going to happen. But you have to remember that the Democrats right now believe that climate change and racial justice are existential threats on par, if not exceeding, COVID-19. And what we're going to see, this is the second point, is what we're going to see is that social justice and climate justice, or climate change activism and stewardship, whether or not it's true or not, that's irrelevant. What's going to happen is it has seen a new path. And just like a virus would overtake something and bring it into itself, what's going to happen is that the climate justice movement is going to use every measure that's been used for COVID-19 to use in order to try and minimize carbon emissions. And all you got to do is go read Joe Biden. This isn't about politics, guys. This is about truth. Okay, go read Joe Biden's plan. The Democrats' plan is to help hold accountable those that have been the biggest polluters. What does that mean? What does it mean to hold oil companies accountable? What's going to happen is that there's going to be a group of bureaucrats in charge of going to a company and making sure that a company is abiding by the new climate change stuff. So we might think that, hey, that's like emission standards. That's a good thing. We want emission standards. You know, you look at what we've done in diesel machinery. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. There's been this tiering and increase in standards of emissions on diesel machines. Well, what we're going to see now is every business, anybody who has a license, and anybody who's trying to get into a place that has a business license, every business is going to have to do their part to stop this existential threat of ending the world. And the result will be a giant group of people. And what it's going to be is it's going to be climate jobs. So under the guise of climate jobs, what we're going to see is the state and the agency workforce double and triple. I guarantee you there's going to be so many agencies and people and bureaucrats and analysts and financial people and HR departments globbing onto this idea that we need to move the needle to save the planet because it's an existential threat. So everything that was done during COVID that's questionable about a state overreach, we are going to see climate justice legislation use those exact same measures, because to the left, they literally think the world is going to cook and blow up and die, and that we can... Man-made climate change isn't up for discussion because they've made it not up for discussion. But let's just be frank, way before we're going to be able to lower the temperature of the planet or cut carbon emissions, way before we can accomplish the things that they want to accomplish, we will have an absolute nightmare bureaucracy and an authoritarian state of agency bureaucrats that will absolutely take us by, they will hold us hostage. So that's the second thing, is that we're going to see this giant increase of people around climate justice. It's going to be bureaucrats, they're going to be the nomenclatura, and in particular, it's going to be around climate justice and then racial justice. Well, I think Minneapolis and LA are both cities that have passed this new thing where they're going to be interviewing and paying attention to how businesses are hiring when it comes to pay, when it comes to gender pay, racial pay, rather than saying, folks, anybody can do anything, and we are not going to judge you by things you cannot control, like your gender, your race, or your religion, the stuff that, like these actual protected classes. Rather than say we can't hire or fire based upon those, you watch what's going to happen now is companies are going to have bureaucrats come into their HR departments and start shaking them down. That's the third point here, is that through the HR department, we will see the most insane liberal craziness you have ever seen. So every company right now, if there's one department that has to have its little, it has to have its blessing from, in terms of you have to have been educated inside the subject matter. It's not the sciences, because that you just have to be able to produce, and it's not any of the trades. It's going to be in the HR department. So what we're already seeing is this giant liberalization of HR departments of every company. And through the HR department, we're going to see initiatives that are going to start analyzing how people are paid according to their race, according to their gender, and they're going to take on initiatives to try and get along with this climate justice thing. So again, my main premise is that we're going to be seeing a giant increase in agency bureaucrats which are going to be the nomenclatura, and then who's going to really empower them are going to be the HR departments of every corporation, because the HR departments are where people are coming out of these lefty, loony, and they are insane colleges. If you talk to a college graduate right now, they are learning social justice, climate justice, propaganda, and believing it full tilt because it's what they've been taught since they were in kindergarten. And I'm not here to deny any of that. I think that we need to seek justice, love mercy, and there's certainly things that should be done to help even the playing field in terms of fairness, but that's equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. You have to be careful there. But that's my prediction, guys. When it comes to a prophecy, the thing that's going to empower the state right now is going to be the HR departments and ultimately the boards of corporations. But boards are still out to make a profit. The HR department doesn't care. The HR department is always where the most insane bureaucracy, stupid rules, and just quite frankly, I mean, just go look up HR stories, terrible HR stories. Now, on the good side, we want to make sure that people aren't abusing others, that we don't have sexual harassment going on. There shouldn't be racial profiling happening. But that's not what we're after, or that's not what the leftist HR department is after. The leftist HR department believes that climate change is an existential threat on par with anything else. It's the greatest thing of our time that we have to conquer. That's insane. And what they're going to do is they're going to cripple companies. They're going to cripple our jobs. They're going to cripple the organizations that we work for and produce things in order to try and lower the temperature of the earth. But really what it is they're going to abide by the nomenclature of political agencies. And then the second thing that they're going to do is they're going to racialize, which I think is the biggest form of racism. They're going to try and seek racial justice through the HR department. And I don't think there's anything more racist than two things. One, forcing people to attend the school by eliminating school choice. Attend the school that's only within their zip code, and then give people free project housing and subsidies in certain areas. So what you've got is this compounding factor where folks get stuck and hamstrung, have their incentives destroyed by the state's help, then they crowd them together in certain areas, and then once they're crowded together, they don't give them the ability to go and choose a school through a school voucher somewhere else. So what you find is the political class keeps destroying incentives and keeps people down and then sticks them in schools that suck. Like, let's just be frank. We all know where all the crappy schools are in all of our neighborhoods. And some people say that it's because we don't fund inner city schools. That's not true. Go look at the funding. Inner city schools are funded like crazy. They get all sorts of help. What it is that there's no choice. There's no consequence to a terrible teacher, a terrible school, and a bad bureaucracy because they can't move. They can't go anywhere. I think that's one of the most racist things in the world, because what's happening is we're getting a divide racially because of what the politicians are doing. It's all tied to that system. So I think that what we're going to see here is that I just think it's racist. I think it's silly. The second thing that I think is racist is the racism of low expectations. What the heck does your skin color have to do with your ability to attract an amazing job? I know brilliant people that are super successful in every race. And is there racism? Yeah. But you know what? There's also, people are jerks. People are sinful. People are corrupt. And without acknowledging that, what good does it do to somebody to destroy their incentives with particular racial cutouts, like to provide help or reparations, or to say, you know what, we're going to put more black people into colleges, we're going to lower the standard for their admissions so that they can come to college. Well, what happens is their dropout rates skyrocket because they're not actually ready. They're being lied to by a bureaucrat. The unintended consequences is that. But it's this racism of low expectations, of thinking that they need handouts, of thinking that they need special programs rather than just allowing them to choose and empowering parents. I just think those two things are nuts. But what we're going to see is climate justice and racial justice rather than actually helping communities that are stuck right now and facing just the unintended consequences of the liberal state is really what it is. They're going to make it worse. And they're going to glob onto everything that they just learned through the COVID pandemic. And what you will see is there's going to be a systematic shakedown of companies and corporations in order to try and create equal outcomes for and close the racial gaps. But what's truly going to happen is they're going to exasperate it. They're going to make it worse. They're going to make everything worse for any community that they help. If you need evidence of this, I mean this nicely, but head into some of the Native American communities. John Stossel has a great video out about if you want to see the consequences of government help and of government killing incentives in the basic structure of things, go look at what has happened in the Native American communities around the United States. In our attempt to try and make right a racial injustice that happened and a genocide, and I think we can all agree that that was terrible, but in response to that, our government has tried to help, and it's why Ronald Reagan said the worst words you could ever hear is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," because what it does is nothing helpful. You think it's helpful, but it's not. Now, the other thing that I'd like to say is that if you really want to help anybody, rather than trying to use the state in order to pull a lever that you've been convinced that lever will help that person. So you think that by lowering the college entrance requirements is going to help more people of any group get in and have more success because of college graduation. You shouldn't do that. Instead, you should rely on your own personal responsibility to help those that you intersect with. Be generous with your time, your teaching, create curriculum, encourage, mentor, be a friend, be a parent, get involved, be a coach, be a teacher, go start your own tutoring classes. Like, that's the way that you do it, rather than trying to use the state in order to accomplish this, because the state has unintended consequences. Because when you shoot for the majority, you shoot for the average. What you actually do is you screw up the fringes or the outliers on either side of that bell curve. So in order to try and create great outcomes by creating free school and free college or whatever it is, you hurt those that excel and you hurt those that are on the wrong end of that bell curve, that aren't good students. And the result is you're trying to force, I think I love that little cartoon where it's like an elephant, a zebra, a monkey, and a fish. And a teacher is standing there saying, all right, for you to have success, go up to the top of the tree and grab this feather. You know, everybody has a different set of gifts, of strengths, of upbringing and abilities, and what we're doing by shooting for the middle in any way, by using the state, we just break incentives. But I'm telling you, that's going to be a big thing. And then last, we're going to see something that I really think is bigger and more dire than anyone's thinking of. So here's my fourth prophecy. The fourth prophecy is that we are going to see China kind of take over. And here's what I mean. I want you to do two things right now. If you've been listening this long, boy, I've been rambling, and you already know most of this stuff. You're a smart, intelligent audience. There's no reason why I should be telling you any of this. You should know this. But go watch a couple of documentaries. The other day I was watching on Netflix, there's a documentary called American Factory. And the reason why I want you to go watch American Factory is because what it does is it highlights how insane and how powerful and how bad of a culture I think the communist Chinese have created for their people. So I'll sum it up this way. Long story short, I think that the Chinese are trying to take over financially. They're trying to build up their power in order to never lose power, because they know that the United States is not communist. And what they're doing is playing a long war in order to protect themselves and protect their power. They're the nomenklatura. They are going to protect their communist system at all costs. And what they're doing is they're trying to slowly infiltrate the United States. It's what the Soviets started, and they're finishing. And here's how they're doing it. Go watch American Factory, and what you'll see is how intense their labor force is, and how they are using central planning and communism to enslave people, essentially. And rather than people working at a place that they love, working at a place that treats them well, and earning a wage that they want to, they are dictated a wage, dictated an amount of time to work, and freedom is very limited. And so here's basically what happens. This billionaire who's politically connected and part of the party, elite billionaire, comes over and takes over a GM plant in Michigan. The GM plant got killed basically because of unions, and basically because big business was too busy building crony relationships rather than just creating products that people would choose, which is why we see, South Korean companies, Hyundai, Nissan, Daewoo, Toyota, just surpassing GM vehicles. But basically, this old plant goes down. This Chinese billionaire invests and says, hey, we want to come to America and do things the way the West does. We're going to put our glass factory here. So their approach was, hey, we can build influence, we can have a win-win, because economically it makes sense for them, and they were going to hire American managers to use American workers and do everything the American way. And what happens is they very quickly find out that the work culture here in America is quite a bit different than in China. Now, I think that there's kind of two parts to this. One, I think the Chinese have an enslavement that's happening through their state and through their workforces, essentially, because they don't have freedom tied to the next thing I'm going to talk about, the social credit system. But the other thing that you have is America is to this place where we are starting to believe the lie that not everyone can be a business owner, not everyone can be an entrepreneur, not everyone can pursue happiness and get rich and build wealth, and we think that, well, you just find a job and hopefully you stick it to your employer and make them pay you, which is kind of the old union way, the labor way, right? We're starting to believe these lies that what we need legislation to give us more wage, rather than focusing on how do I find the best way to add the most amount of value and then position myself well so that people will pay me a lot. People don't understand that they're worth a lot more than whatever. They're short-sighted. And what's happening is there's a lot of corporations, particularly once the labor unions get in there and convince them that the only way that they're going to make money is because of the labor union. Our workforce becomes kind of silly. Now, I think we have a lot. I'm not poo-pooing America. I think we have innovation, and we have things happening here that could never happen in China. And it's why Chinese business steals our technology, because they can't innovate that way. But basically what happens is these guys, they start working with American labor, and they are not efficient. And they very quickly see that this is not going to work. They're frustrated. They work too short of hours, get paid too much to produce too little. So the Chinese are getting more and more frustrated. So finally they take the supervisors over to China. And when they put them into the Chinese workforce, all of a sudden they see how crazy and insane it is. And basically that they are like an army at this corporation. And the more you peer into that, the scarier it gets, particularly when you go do the second thing I want you. So go watch American Factory, because I think it illustrates the story, especially when you realize, they don't touch on this, that those people's lives are totally controlled and manipulated. About 80%, there's still some free choice in there, but it's probably 70% manipulated and controlled by the communist state. And that leads me to the second thing I'd want you to do to highlight why China is going to be taking over. Go read or go watch. I want you to just go to YouTube and type in 2020 social or Chinese social credit system. And I want you to read and watch the story. There's an NBC story, which is really funny because it does not position the state as negative or bad at all. It really just kind of gives them a pass. But when you go study what they're doing with this social credit system, it's terrifying. Basically, you have this. The Chinese wanted to make doing business within China more reputable. That's what their propagandists say. So what they're trying to do is to become more trustworthy. They're basically creating a credit report for your character and for your social. But what it's doing is they're monitoring everything anybody does. There's cameras, like billions or millions of cameras throughout China. And you have this score that's given to you by a central group of connected bureaucrats and Communist Party workers. If you gossip, if you are late on payments, if you have too much debt, if you're out of shape, if you eat poorly, if you get tickets, if you smoke, if you do anything that they don't like, your score starts to go down. And what happens is certain jobs, education, and pricing for services that are provided by the state are tied to your ability to score properly. Okay? And play it forward into COVID-19. The same thing's going to happen. Did you do the things to stay safe? Yep. All right. Your safety score is 900. You get to have whatever job you want. You watch. It'll happen. But go watch that. And what you'll see is you will realize very quickly that we have a Trojan horse here, because everybody can watch that and be like, that's terrible. I think most people would. There's a lot of people that want to save the planet that are like, this is a great tool that we could totally lower the temperature of the earth. And it would be great. We could finally have a blissful utopia. Communism leads to murder every time. Because this is the thing. If you do the things that are on their gradient scale that's pretty bad, you get thrown into a gulag. It's not a gulag, but it's a forced labor camp. Or you get sent into Facebook prison, Facebook jail, where you can't go on the transit stations at a certain price, and they apply pricing things to you. But while they're doing this, they're showing all these people check their score and show how they're monitored. And guess what they're using? They're using an iPhone and Android phones, Samsung and iPhone. Folks, while big tech claims to be so great, and they won't do business in Georgia or wherever it is, what was it, North Carolina or South Carolina, because they had a law that said something about abortions. Or Hollywood and big tech won't do plants there. They're not going to do business in that state because that's a terrible law. On the other side, they are using their technology to literally enslave and imprison people on the other side of the world. And I think what we can come to terms with and come to grips with is that big tech, they think they're smarter than everybody else. They think that they should be in charge of dictating the way our lives go, and they're going to implement a system. And the simple system right now is going to be, how do you show how safe you've been? And that's the big change that's coming. So those are my 4 prophecies, man. Those are the 4 predictions. 1, way more bureaucrats. The nomenclature is here. It's going to come in. HR departments are going to empower those bureaucrats, and we have to abide by the rules, right? And then what we're going to see is that the social justice and climate justice are going to glob on, and that's what the HR departments are going to use to basically enslave us. And then lastly, we're going to see China and big tech start to creep in. We're going to have China-like controls across all of our lives very soon here if we're not careful. The beauty is we can choose to turn our phones off, and we can grab our friends and family and build relationships and not allow this. But those are my predictions. Like and subscribe if you think this is interesting. Good luck. God bless.